On behalf of Cuts International, I welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time to attend our event this afternoon. May I request everybody to please be seated, people at the back, on the sides. To begin with, let me thank His Excellency Australian High Commissioner, Ambassador Philip Green. Also, I thank the wonderful audience and I look forward to listening to today's session. High Commissioner Philip Green is an Australian diplomat with experience on 4 continents, having served as Ambassador or High Commissioner to Germany, Singapore, South Africa, and Kenya. He served as the head of the division in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, responsible for managing Australia's relation with the United States during the Trump's presidency. High Commissioner Green's career includes the following highlights. Oversight of the implementation of Australia's Indo-Pacific strategy following its launch in 2017, led responsibility for the development of Australia's policy on the Quad from 2017 to 2019, piloting the conclusion of the enhanced strategic partnership with Germany and the Australia-Germany Hydrogen Accord, the conclusion of Australia's comprehensive strategic partnership with Singapore in 2016, and the upgrade to the Australia-Singapore Free Trade Agreement in the same year. Ambassador Green was Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's international advisor, who have also been on our advisory board, and the Chief of Staff to Foreign Minister Rudd. He led the Secretariat for the Review of Australian Intelligence Agencies, and Ambassador Green was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for his role in response to the Bali terrorist tragedy in 2002. He is a graduate of the University of Sydney in Arts, First Class Honours and Law. He holds honorary degrees from James Cook University and Murdoch University. With this, I am pleased to invite His Excellency High Commissioner Philip Green, Australia High Commission, New Delhi, to deliver his valuable remarks. Before that, I'm pleased to invite Pradeep S. Mehta, Secretary General, Cuts International.
Okay.
Over to you.
Well, anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Philip, for having agreed to come here and speak to a literate audience in Jaipur who would be interested to know as to what is happening in terms of Australia-India relations. I have just come back last night after a week's hectic tour of Australia, organizing events in Sydney, Melbourne, and in Canberra. Canberra was with the Australian National University, with whom we had organized a similar event 10 years ago when Peter Varghese was the Foreign Secretary. So it was a kind of an encore. At Melbourne, we organized an event on. Now, the event in Canberra was more looking at the larger picture of India-Australia partnership in the trade sphere, and not necessarily bilateral, but including bilateral relations. At Melbourne, the event was organized by the Australia-India Institute, headed by the wonderful Honorable Lisa Singh, which is looking at a very particular aspect of the India-Australia relations, which is on critical minerals and metals. And in the context of the Quad, and that is one thing missing in our title here, is that Quad becomes very important in the context of whatever India-Australia relationship that we discuss. Finally, the event was held in Sydney, where the Consulate General of India was kind enough to co-organize it and co-host it, along with Newland Group, with several names in the Australian policy space, including Tim Thomas, who's the Centre for Australia-India Relations, and so on. And there were many good names. There are reports of that. All these will be put out shortly by us. They take time, the weekend is coming up, and so on. And I'm proud to say that whatever happened, and from there I'll segue into my questions to Philip. One of the things which came out very clearly was, at Cuts we're doing a lot of work on defense relations with US. And that is a very promising area that we see. Particularly in the context of the fact is that the Honorable Prime Minister Modi, in launching his Atmanirbhar program, has focused upon developing Indian industry to make in India for the world. So we see there is quite a lot of, what I will say, a lot of scope, a lot of potential to expand this further. And as it happens, Philip spoke just the other day to a press, ABP, I think, where he also stressed upon defense. With that, may I now invite Philip to please come and address. This is going to be a fireside chat. Philip is not going to make a speech, but you're welcome to make opening remarks, and then I'll come to the questions that we discussed so that we make it as interactive as far as possible. Philip, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Pradeep, and can I greet you all today using the word Yumalundi. Yumalundi is the word in the language of the indigenous people, which means hello and welcome. And by greeting you in this way, I'm demonstrating the respect of our
Please put your phone on silent or switch it off if you can't. Thank you. Sorry.
So, Australia-India relations are at the highest point they have ever been. And the second Modi term has been the golden era of our bilateral relations. You've all seen the photographs of our prime ministers together at Kudos Stadium and at Ahmedabad, Narendra Modi Stadium. There's a genuine bond between the two of them, and there are many, many things that are going well in our bilateral. But I want to explain to you that there are three historic drivers which are propelling our bilateral relationship. So this is not just sentiment, and these drivers are strategic, that is to say they are enduring. And so I'm very confident that our bilateral relationship will continue to become up. So the first is the strategic situation in the Indo-Pacific, where Australia and India feel alike that the prosperity and stability of our region that we have had for a very long time is under threat. And stability and open economy ambitions that we and India do. That means that we have a level of strategic alignment that we have never had before. And I believe that will go on for decades and will form one of the key parts of our bilateral relationship. The second thing is economic complementarity. So, India is the 5th biggest economy in the world, and it's growing at over 7% per annum. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world. Now, that means that every country in the world is turning greater attention to India, and so are we. But for us it's different, because our economies are complementary. That is to say, the things that we offer in our economy are very different from the things that India offers, and vice versa. So, India is full of people, and this country will inevitably be a services and manufacturing superpower. Our country is large and short of people. We will never be a manufacturing superpower. But what we have is the metals and minerals and energy that India needs for its development. So whether it's critical minerals, whether it's LNG, whether it's hydrogen, whether indeed it is our universities and the skills that they can help India develop for the very large number of people who graduate every year. Australia is a beautiful match for India's economy. I mean, there's other things. The fact that we have strategic alignment helps our economies, especially a moment when we are all concerned about economic security. And the fact that we are neighbours just across the Indian Ocean matters. But the key thing is that economic complementarity. Another driver that we think will be enduring. And thirdly, and my favourite, what we call the human bridge. Now nearly 1 million people of Indian origin who call Australia home. Now, I'm very conscious 1 million people is not a lot in Indian terms, but it's a lot in Australian terms. It's nearly 4% of our population. And let me tell you something that you might not be aware of, and this is really remarkable. We welcome our Indian migrants, and they are making an outsized contribution to our society. And you might say, well, an ambassador would say that, but I've got the statistics to back it up. Because our census data shows that people of Indian origin in Australia are 2 times more likely to have a higher degree than people from any other origin in Australia, including Anglo-Celtic people like me. People from India are 1.8 times more likely to open a business than people from every other community, on average. And people of Indian origin, this is perhaps the most surprising thing, are 1.5 times more likely than the other people in Australia to be active in social or community affairs in our country. Be that the local Parents and Citizens Association of the local school, be that the Dog and Cat Club, be that the athletics club. So that's the sort of migrant that we want in Australia, and people of Indian origin are making an outsized contribution.
May I, Philip? May I? Yeah. Carry on from where you left. This hotel is owned by an Australian of Indian origin. And he was quite delighted that he was Pradeep Saluja. And he is gung-ho on ECTA, which I'll come to a little later. But to add that, one of the points that I made in one of the meetings in Australia is, why don't you look at USA as an example, which has trained, educated a very large number of Indians and gained from their staying back in the US. Similarly, my own son-in-law, having studied in Australia, has now stayed back. And there are many colleagues of his, Philip, who have, so you are able to see this kind of, what the new term that I heard there was brain chain and not brain loss or brain gain, in the sense that now if you, that is a model which would help Australia to look at in terms of as to how to establish closer relations with India, looking at the diaspora as a base. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pradeep. So that's the baseline that we've got. 3 strategic drivers that are pushing our relationship forward. But I just want to talk to you about a few things that we are trying to do to make sure that that dynamism has all of the life that it should. So on the strategic side, the key ambition that I have is to strengthen what we call maritime domain awareness between Australia and India. We share the Indian Ocean, and in our case, the bit of it that we are most interested in is the Eastern Indian Ocean. It's a big ocean, and we both have a big strategic interest in it. And each of us have capacities to understand what is going on in that ocean, but neither of us has enough. So sharing our resources and sharing our platforms and sharing the islands that are between our large land masses as a way of ensuring that our ships and planes can understand what is happening in that big ocean and be alert to malign influence is something that can drive our relationship further. Secondly, the Quad. We know that Quad is making huge steps, but I just want to underline to you how influential that is on our bilateral relationship. Because every time there is a Quad meeting, and there's barely a fortnight goes by where there isn't one, and be that Quad meeting on counter cyber, or be that Quad meeting on delivering infrastructure, the Australian and the Indian, as well as the American and Japanese partners, are getting to know one another. And on the sidelines of those meetings, they're working out what they can do bilaterally as well as quadrilaterally. And that is truly driving our bilateral relationship. The third one on our strategic interests is the way that we are each playing in what I call the subdomains of the Indo-Pacific. The way in which India is seeking to have greater influence in the Southwest Pacific, which we warmly welcome, and which where frankly we have more heft and can help guide and support India. And the Indian Ocean, where India is naturally the leader and we are taking a bigger interest. So, just next weekend in Perth, there will be a major meeting of the Indian Ocean Conference, co-chaired by Dr. Jaishankar and my Foreign Minister, Penny Wong. It is a symbol of the way in which we are working together in the Indian Ocean. On the economic side, what are we trying to do? First and most important thing is to deliver the second phase of our free trade agreement, which we call CEPA. Just so you know, this first phase has gone extremely well. The agreement is now in place. The utilisation rate of the tariff reductions from that agreement is 77%. That means to say 77% of the exporters and importers who have the chance to take advantage of that agreement are. That's the highest utilisation rate that India has for any of its free trade agreements. And the results are stark. So exports of apparel, clothing, from India to Australia are up 16%. And exports of agricultural goods from India to Australia are up nearly 10%. That is working, but for us it's not enough. We want to have the second phase of this free trade agreement, and I'm saying very directly to your ministers and senior officials, I know you've got an election coming up and that's not a great time to conclude a free trade agreement, but immediately after that I want to get serious about the hard work that needs to be done so that we can make our economy work even better for Make in India. So we can reduce tariffs of Australian exports like wool and cotton into your country so that your manufacturers and exporters of apparel can be even more effective. And the same applies across a range of minerals and metals.
May I, Philip?
Yes, by all means.
Yes, thank you. No, this evolving dynamics in the Indo-Pacific there's another platform which you may like to speak about is IPEF. There again, India and Australia are partners, and there are a lot of things. This is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, which has been floated mainly by the US, for those who may not know what I'm talking about. Having said that, Indian Ocean Conference at Perth is something which I'm going back to soon after. It's going to be hectic, and I look forward to closer understanding about this, particularly in the context of security issues. Over to you, Philip.
So there's a number of particular sectors I could run through, and the key ones that I'm interested in are agriculture, where we want to do more to help the 700 million Indians whose livelihoods depend on the land. The solar PV supply chain, where we want India to be a major manufacturer of solar panels for us, for India, and for the world. For critical minerals, where if India is going to be a major manufacturer of batteries and electric vehicles, you will need our lithium, we're the biggest exporter in the world, and our cobalt, we're the second largest producer in the world. But the one that I just want to focus on right now is education. So we all know that there is a very good recent history in Indian students coming to Australia, more than 125,000 there as we speak. We welcome that. But we can't train enough Indians who need to be trained in Australia. And this shouldn't be a one-way street. So your government has now made it possible for foreign universities to set up branch campuses in Gift City. And this is hugely advantageous to Indian families. It means that a fully accredited Australian degree would be available here in India at a fraction of the price and without all of the family and social costs of going from one country to another. Now, your government opened to all universities in the world the opportunity to open in Gift City. In the whole world, 2 universities have taken up that opportunity. They're both from Australia. Deakin University from Victoria and the University of Wollongong from New South Wales. And now, as a result of a further reform, your government is allowing foreign branch campuses elsewhere in the country. And I've got a long list of Australian universities that want to come in and offer that greater opportunity for Indian students. Final thing I want to say, you remember my 3 strategic drivers: strategic alignment, economic complementarity, and the human bridge. So what have we done about that? We've established, Pradeep mentioned it, the Centre for Australia-India Relations. That is led by 2 outstanding Australians of Indian origin, and it's backed by tens of millions of dollars of Australian money. And our objective with this is to engage our population of people of Indian origin, to strengthen the ties between our 2 countries, and in particular, to drive business ties. Now, we're the only country in the world to have established such a centre to take advantage of the strong bilateral links that can be occasioned by people of Indian origin in our country, and we're very proud of it. Pradeep, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much, and
Thank you very much.
You can start the fire.
No. let me, I mean, you covered all.
Be sitting there with him.
Shall we?
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much for a lovely tour de force of looking at the Australia-India relationship in every possible way. And you answered all the questions that we had in mind, which we have shared with you, particularly on the kind of... What I did foresee, and I must tell you this, that in this recent trip I found a lot of gung-ho among the Australians. There are a few skeptics as well, which is bound to happen even in India. I received a comment from one of our former trade bureaucrats that this is Australia-India FTA is a win-loss. We calculated all that and so on and so forth. But anyway, we'll come back to that later on. The important part, that is what you would like to speak about, is the strategic interest. Now, Prime Minister Modi has clearly announced the policy of the Government of India to not look east but act east. So in that, Indian Ocean is a very important part of the Act East policy, and therefore one has to look at that. The only trouble that we face often is, how do we evaluate the strategic gains or losses? That is something which we make an effort to do in the best manner possible. But that is something which we have to answer to all skeptics. So other than the gains and losses in terms of the trade, there are other gains which we must look at. And what we can see, I mean, anecdotally, there's clearly a lot to be said. Secondly, the Indo-Pacific is looking at the kind of security issues which India is facing in the region. And that again is very important for us. And I don't want to go into that in detail, Philip, but as you know, security is now a major concern for most countries in the world, particularly because of the fact that the world is fragmenting in a sense. The kind of war in Ukraine and Middle East and Africa and many countries, etc. How would you visualize the role, Philip, of civil society organizations in this discourse? Finally, I would like to just mention one comment from the last session which I felt really sad. We do a lot of work in Africa, by the way. We've been working there since 25 years, Philip. And we were actually quite happy with the kind of Australia-Japan partnership to extend Indian cooperation in Africa. But in that climate change panel, what I saw was the absolute miss of any nation from Africa or Latin America. That I thought was a big miss, and this is something which I'll tell Sanjay Rao, but I just thought let me mention it because it was a very serious matter. Over to you.
So, you're right. We need to keep a careful eye on how the strategic balance is going and how successful or not successful we are being. And it's a difficult and impressionistic calculation. It's one that, in our case, we would do with all of our agencies sitting together, and probably the agency with the pen being our chief intelligence organisation, which is called ONI. I guess let me give you a couple of pointers as to what we think. First of all, it's our stated view that the strategic challenges facing us and that the same sort of strategic challenges that face you are accelerating. So we're doing a lot, but there is no reason to rest on our laurels. I would have to say that in the domain that is our key partners in the region, the last few years has been very positive. I mean, the last, I've been here 5 months, and the last time I was here before that was in 2019. And at that time, I was responsible for our Indo-Pacific policies, including the Quad. And I came here on Quad business. So at that time, the Quad had no leaders meeting. In fact, Quad meetings were amongst senior officials and undertaken on the sidelines of other meetings. We had no set agenda. We had no work plan. And sometimes those meetings even happened without a communique being issued. And when it was a sad little thing of 5 or 6 lines. You can look them up, right? You run the video forward to 2023 when I arrived here, and you've got annual Quad summits of leaders. You've got a very clear work program with a huge amount of runs on the board. When you look at those Quad statements, now they run to several pages of the things that we are doing. And of course, we have a very settled work program over 4 major fields. So that's transformed. I've just been in Europe. I was ambassador to Germany, and the last few years has seen a very fast uptick in the understanding in the key European players, and I'm thinking now Britain, Germany, France, EU, of the strategic dynamics in the Indo-Pacific and the need for Europe to do more. So that's a positive. We think we've done well in the Southwest Pacific, the small islands which are our nearest neighbours, and which feel the strategic dynamics in a very particular way. We are placing huge emphasis on our diplomacy there. I mean, 2 months into our new government, our Foreign Minister Penny Wong had spent more time in those 2 months in South Pacific Island nations than she spent in Australia. That's the sort of emphasis we're putting on. But there's other areas which are complex. The level of contestation in ASEAN remains very strong. And I don't need to tell you about the Indian Ocean, where there is a high level of contestation. So on your question of how you make that balance, it's a complex one. We've done a lot, but there's no reason to accelerate what we're doing together.
Thank you very much. And the last question, what would you see as the role of the civil society?
Oh, yeah, very important. So there's a lot of things we can do as governments, but government is pacey and has politics and media intruding always into what we do. Institutions like yours has the capacity to work behind the scenes, quietly, and develop long-term thinking and policies that can feed into policy making. And it's also possible, although frankly this is less an issue, I would once have said, between India and Australia, these are forums in which we can discuss sensitive issues that would be difficult to put on the table. at the government level. Actually, I'm not sure I need to say that anymore.
Yeah.
Because, we've now got a level of maturity of our relationship that I think we can discuss sensitive issues at the level of government.
Thank you, Philip. Can we take a few questions? Yes, please. And please identify yourself. And please make your question sharp.
Australia provides excellent.
What is your question, sir?
I'm coming to the question. Australia provides excellent facilities and educational environment in higher education and research. And lots of Indians prefer to go to Australia for their higher education and research. I'm myself adjunct professor at RMIT University, Melbourne, Australia, and I visited them many times. My point and question is, Australia will be a lot smarter by attracting more and more Indian students to their campuses. And they can do that through providing the education little more affordable. The Australian education for an Indian is very expensive in terms of tuition fees. Like I would like to go to Germany where tuition fees is negligible than coming to the Australia. So in that respect, I think you will get very good students if you can look at the tuition fees at Australian universities.
That's a problem even we face in the US, and we have to deal with it. Either we take it or leave it,
Oh, yeah,
Because
I
the cost,
but what I mentioned initially that Australia will be a lot smarter by attracting more Indian people.
Thank you.
Oh, I know about that.
1 minute.
I know.
1 minute. 1 minute. There's a
I
gentleman
know
at the
about
back. Please identify yourself. Please identify yourself.
I am N.D. Mathur, Dean, Jaipur School of Economics, GECRC University, Jaipur. Yesterday, a comment was made in JLF by former Prime Minister of Australia that I give 10 out of 10 to Indian-Australian relationship. But the trade is not picking up. And the statement given was that more trade is with the China but lesser with the India. And the reason given was the protectionism. So what is your opinion on that?
Thank you. I'll take one more question from here. Is there any lady? 1 minute. I would like a lady to raise a question. Hello. This becomes a manel then. Yes, please. Please identify yourself. Just a minute. And then you? After her? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. My name is Umanshi. My question is different, related to China. I think China is increasing aggression on Indo-Pacific region. So then what do you think? I want to know about your policy. Second question is, we should fight against China together because we are a strategic partner, India and Australia. So I want to know about your policy related to China.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Lady, shall we take 5 questions then, Philip? Then what?
I think
Oh,
can I just...
Yeah, please. Yeah. Hold on. Yeah.
Otherwise I'll forget. So, Professor, thank you very much. You're very kind about Australian education, and we want to make sure that our education is the highest level, and that involves some cost. Happily, there are some differences between different institutions in Australia, and so there are some different options that an Indian student has. Our vice-chancellors are very conscious of cost, and they do try, but, things are expensive in Australia, and that's a reality. Of course, I think it's also a reality that many Indian students who go to Australia also manage to find a job in their part-time, and that helps them pay for the study. But I would just come back to the point that the courses that will now, and the degrees that will now be available in India from Australian institutions will be a fraction of the cost, and that at least provides folk with another option. The gentleman who asked about trade, so you've got to be a bit careful with the big trade numbers because they're largely driven by huge resource deals. And if BHP sends one huge consignment in one quarter, it will skew the figures one way or another. I think the long-term trend is upward in terms of Australia-India trade. And What's more important is that we focus on that fragment of the trade that's not the pure resources. Because, yeah, we can ship a lot of coal here, we can ship a lot of iron ore here. But, can we start to ship what's called metallurgical polysilicon, which is the fundamental ingredient for making photovoltaic panels, which we want India to be a major manufacturer of PV panels. Can we start to increase that? Can we start to increase the exports of lithium hydroxide, which is the key ingredient into making batteries? They're the things that I'm really watching, because I can't control how much a big firm ships a lot of coal in a particular quarter. So I think give me the duration of my posting to demonstrate that we can shift on these important parts of the trading relationship. Thank you very much for your question on China. Of course, it's sensitive. We've been through a very difficult patch in our bilateral relationship with China. We've been subject to trade measures imposed by the Chinese government. We've been subject to travel warnings which discourage Chinese people to travel and study in Australia. And some of our nationals have been held on questionable charges, let's say it that way, in under the Chinese authorities. We are at the moment stabilising our bilateral relationship with China, and that's important because I think none of us want an unstable relationship with one of the great powers of the world. But our mantra is that we will cooperate with China where we can, disagree where we must, and always act in our national interest and in engagement with our partners. In all of that, we are prepared to call out the things that are not good about China's engagement in the world. So China is undertaking the largest military modernisation that the planet has seen since the Second World War. And that is happening without any strategic reassurance. No public white paper which would indicate what this military build-up is for. And that might give us some cause for comfort about why it's being done. We call that out and we say, that's not right. And the second one is this. So a month or so ago, you probably heard the news, Australian Navy divers in the water, in international waters, and they are subject to a sonar attack. We regard this as unprofessional and dangerous activity, and we call it out for what it is.
Thank you. I'll take 3 more questions. Lady here. Yeah. Mike, please. Hello.
I'm okay with that mic.
No.
Okay.
It's being recorded, so.
Thank you.
Please identify
I'm
yourself.
Gayatri. I'm also a fellow Australian. I've settled here in Jaipur. I'm from East Kurrajong originally. Sorry about the American accent there. My question, I've got 2 quick questions. One is definitely the Australian government has been calling out a lot more stuff, and I've seen them taking a very strong stance with China and with what else is going on, which is incorrect. And they have developed a beautiful, strong relationship with India over the years compared to much earlier where we were not strong. And we felt kind of left out as India. They were not supporting us. Do you see that this change will continue, like you're saying, in the next few decades, regardless of which government comes into power, because of the strategic alliances you've built? And is there anything else which would help us in the future as well, staying strong? That's one question. The second question I have for you as well is, with a lot of Australians who have chosen to settle down in Australia, or there's a lot of us who've come back, and slowly more of us coming back, we've got children who we'd like to send back home as well to experience living in Australia, working in Australia, because it's a very different environment, which is better for them to get that independence. It's a little bit difficult to get back for the children into universities there as well, despite being Australian citizens.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I wanted to ask,
Yeah,
is there something you're setting up for that?
Hello, where's the mic, Wala? Yeah. Just a minute. At the back, the lady, young lady there at the back. I'm being a little partial towards ladies.
Thank you so much. I'm Debashri Hazarika. I work as a research associate in CUTS International. Thank you, both of you, for giving us such an informative and to know about this session, about the relations as so far. So my question is, as you said that Australia is very interested in giving out skills, imparting skills to India because of our such big population. And also in today's age where digital era, where in the fourth industrial revolution, where AI and technology is such a big part, my question is, how are you going to make it more democratic? As Australia and India, we are bounded with cricket, curry and Commonwealth. So how are you going to make it democratic so that there is not a dependency of core and periphery being brought again? Dependency created where the core is controlling the periphery.
There's another jargon, Philip, which I heard in Australia was fun, food, and fun and festival. So that's again, But one more question, usual. Just a minute.
Thank you, sir. I'm Ujjwal Kumar from CUTS International. My question is related with one of the strategic bilateral relationship with respect to norm setting at the global level, because it's becoming more strategic now, particularly for the emerging and critical technology regulations. So A is the relationship between the two norms in domestic countries, like Australia having new cyber laws and cyber framework. India is considering one. So at one level, there is a relationship between influencing the domestic regulatory framework, and another level is international norm setting. So how do you see the India?
Thank you.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of questions, especially as the Australian national here asked too. As you know, access to Australian education and healthcare and a range of other benefits applies universally if you were an Australian national. So your children will have as much right to attend Australian universities as will mine. And that will always be so. If you're an Australian national, doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, doesn't matter where you choose to live, those rights prevail. Now, we might talk offline about if your children are learning in an Indian environment, and how do their marks then get correlated into Australian university? That might be more complicated, but let's talk about that offline. So I was very deliberate in setting up my talk saying that I think there are three strategic drivers which are enduring. You asked the question whether you think they will endure changes of government. Well, of course, in this last Modi term, which we regard as the golden age, that has been bookended by two different Australian governments. And I know that some Indians were inclined to ask the question when the Labor government was elected 20 months ago, whether things would be as warm as they were under the previous government. And I really think those questions have been answered. And you see the pictures of Anthony Albanese and Narendra Modi, and you see him calling him the boss, and you see all of the things that our government is doing. As you know, I think that's on the wall. I mean, going forward, I'm very confident. I mean, I can't tell you what might occur in some future government or opposition's policies, but overall, I'm very confident about how that plays out. Now, the lady there asked about skills. Oh yeah, no. You said you made an interesting point about democracy, and I think you meant about power relativities actually. And yeah, I mean, look, we're not encouraging Indian students to come to Australia in order to fill them full of Australian values that will somehow increase our global cultural power. That's not our objective. Maybe more Indians will imbibe a few more Australian values, and that might be helpful to them, or it might not. I think the boot really is on the other foot, right? You know, India is now the 5th biggest economy in the world. It seeks to be, well, it says it is a leading power in global affairs. And it won't only be a few years if trends continue, and I expect them to, that India will be the 3rd biggest country, most powerful country on earth. So, if anything, should we be worried about the level of influence that India would have over our society? We're not. We're not. You know, we see India doing good in the world. And we don't see India throwing its weight around in a way that is unwelcome. So I guess I'd never say never, but I would say for the time being, we're very comfortable. And I don't think that there is much that should trouble Indians about the level of influence that our society has over them. Question on rules and norms. So this is big and hard, and you know, it's a characteristic of our age that the strategic contestation that is going on doesn't just have a military dimension, and doesn't just have a political systems dimension, and doesn't just have a development assistance and infrastructure dimension. It's also got a rules and norms dimension. And in any number of international forums, we are working with our partners to make sure that more than less, small nations can remain sovereign. More than less, the mighty don't have to share power with the small. You know, more than less, systems that are open and free and that allow an easy movement of capital, labour and goods and services. And more than less, sentiments which are natural for democracies compared to autocracies are more prominent. Now, that's sort of easy to say at the level of generality, but, you know, on the floor of the International Telecommunications Union, on the floor of the International Maritime Organization, on the floor of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, this is a day-by-day arm wrestle. And it's an arm wrestle where, you know, the great majority of times, India and Australia are on the same side. So the strategic alignment that we talked about, and I didn't say it, but thank you very much for raising it, because it's really important. It is not just playing out in the dimensions that we normally think of as strategic dimensions. It now has this global character, and it's a hard struggle, I have to tell you.
Thank you very much. Do you have time for a few more questions?
One more round.
One more round. Fine, please. Gentleman at the back, and then you.
Dr. Anil Mehta from Banasthali University. Ours is a premier institution in the world in the field of women education.
Would you like to come here? Because the High Commissioner cannot see you.
Thank you.
And it is a very well-known institution of Rajasthan, Philip. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Please.
So, sir, ours is a premier institution in the world in women education where more than 18,000 female students are studying in a single campus. It is a residential university. Apart from the regular education, it is providing the value-based education particularly. So I just wanted to know that whether in Australia, are there universities who are exclusively providing education to the women students, number one? And secondly, what is the probability or possibility of collaboration with our university in any Australian prestigious women university so that we can work together, we can have the exchange programs also? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, who else is there? Yeah, Pratik and then Rajan.
Pratik Saluja.
Yeah.
Ambassador, a quick question. Does DEMIA accredit all these, because DEMIA does have, strict guidelines of immigration, all these universities which are going to come over here, does that, do DEMIA give them additional points for having an Australian education, or, does that? Thank you.
Thank you. This Prashant has been raising his hand for a long time. I thought you said you wanted to speak, but did it? Go ahead. Yeah, Mike, please.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
What's your name?
Yeah, His Excellency, my name is Prashant. I'm today here in my individual capacity, but I would like to better introduce that I worked with Mr. Mehta for around 8 years. So my question is very short. You spoke of maritime domain awareness. So at the bilateral level, there are certain things going on. But what about integrating it at the Quad level in future to match the scope and scale of Chinese military modernization and deter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region?
Thank you.
Thank you. So, to the gentleman, first of all, to say I don't think that we have universities in Australia that were solely for women. That's not our tradition. We have schools which are solely for women. That's more normal, although it's a declining level. But that is no bar to engagement between Australian and Indian schools. And I will say this, I mean, I speak for the Australian government, but when I talk to Australian universities, when I talk to state governments, when I talk to educational institutions, everywhere there is an ambition to be more engaged in India. So, and we can help you identify a school that might want to be involved with you in all sorts of ways. And let me say, I was in Hyderabad last week, and my job is always fun, but sometimes it's absolutely wonderful. I found at the Apollo Hospital in Hyderabad 25 Australian medical students doing half a year, fully part of their course in the Apollo Hospital there. And these bright-eyed 21-year-olds with broad Australian accents thrown into Hyderabad and swimming, loving it. It was, really, really charming, really charming to see. Maritime domain awareness. So we're doing a lot at the bilateral level. We do a bit at the trilateral level with some other countries in the region, and that can help strengthen the work that we do. But we got to be, look, it's a complex business to get naval and air assets in comparable places at the right time to be able to help each other. And so trying to do everything at the level of the Quad doesn't make sense. So I'll tell you what we are doing at the level of the Quad, and this is really interesting. We are, as a group, purchasing commercially available overhead imagery to make available to small countries in the region who otherwise would have no capacity to be able to buy this stuff, so that they have better information on what is going on in their near abroad. And in particular, this is helpful for them in understanding what we call dark shipping. That is to say, ships that are not equipped with the normal communications mechanisms which allow a state whose waters they're in to understand that they are there. And that's enormously important for these states to stop smuggling, be that of guns or people or whatever, and straight out criminal activity, as well as strategic input that we wouldn't want, or that they wouldn't want. So that's an important dimension. Now there was a third question, and I've lost it. Oh, so oh yeah. So we don't regulate the Australian universities that operate here, but the Indian government does, right? So and the most important parameter is this, that a university has to be in the top, I think it's 500 or 1,000 in the world rankings, to be able to apply for a foreign branch campus license. And just to give you an idea, I mean, that doesn't sound very high, but you'd be surprised at how many universities there are in the world. There's more than 4,000. So that's a reasonably select group of universities. And so, for instance, Deakin, which is opening the campus in Gift City, is ranked about 150th in the world, which is about the same as IIT Madras. So, you know, this is high. And we're also seeing a higher level of interest from what we call the G8 universities, the top 8 universities in Australia. So I don't think I have to worry about the quality of the Australian institutions that are setting up here.
Yeah, and the immigration department, would accept that 30 point or 40 point, whatever they used to do that during our time, you had those classifications for immigration at that time.
Yeah.
So they would probably accept, although being an Australian university in India, do they still classify as like a 30 point for immigration in Australia?
I don't know that we would make a distinction between a degree from an Australian university and a degree from an Indian university of similar type, but I'd have to check. I'm sorry. I'm only in my 5th month here. I don't know everything.
Thank you very much, Philip. That was an excellent powwow, I would say. Yeah. Quickly. Yeah.
I can speak loudly, no problem. The question which comes to our mind is there is a sudden jump in the interest in Australia from within India.
Your name, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm Rajendra Banawat. I was a civil servant for about 38 years, and I've been working or associated with the civil society organizations, including CUTS. So, one is that when the government has permitted foreign universities to have branch campuses in India, why is it that there is not enough momentum in that? Not many universities have started having branch campuses here. We don't, at least in Rajasthan, we don't find many. Any obstacles that you think? Second question is, India is a... very short, one liner. India is the fastest growing economy and still there is a lot of inequity. How do Australians perceive as India? Fastest growing economy or country with a very fairly large degree of inequity?
Rajan, your second question requires a seminar for the whole day.
It does. It really does. So look, the answer.
Why don't you answer the first question?
I'll answer the second question first. So, what Australian firms are focusing on, and we are encouraging them to focus on, is the growth of the Indian middle class.
Yeah.
So, there's always been a group of Indians who are very wealthy, and maybe that group's growing. What is really striking is the number of people in India who are now, let me put it this way, who are now in a bracket that they would be able to afford Australian quality goods and services. So who is earning enough to be able to have a holiday in Australia? Who is earning enough to choose for their son or daughter to have a wedding in Australia? Who is wealthy enough to be able to buy Australian wine? And who is wealthy enough to be able to buy, Australian lamb products? That's the segment of the market that we're interested in, and it's very well known that that segment is growing. What was the other question, Pradeep?
That's it.
Why is the momentum of the foreign universities?
So because it's new, right? So I don't know when it was that foreign universities could start in Gift City, but that's only a couple of years ago. The regulation which allowed foreign branch campuses in places other than Gift City in India, that was only passed in December. That's only a month and a half old.
Well,
So,
no, Philip, I can answer that question better for Rajen's benefit. We have too many regulatory barriers and mindset problem. Let me tell you that we deal with it on a constant basis, and therefore we know that. It's your own brethren who are the blockers,
But is it only on this side of the...
No, this side is particularly bad. In Australia, it is much more open. We have not spoken about reciprocity. Philip, do I presume that there will be reciprocity if Indian universities want to open in Australia? I suppose yes. No, I don't know, but I suppose it can be a fair demand. Having said that, let me conclude, Philip, with just a point which I made earlier. I met the Indian High Commissioner, the new High Commissioner in Canberra, Gopal Bagle, who's an old friend and one of our very good diplomats. And we spoke about, he is also equally keen on expanding the defense equipment relationship between India and Australia. Not defense is already happening. Now, one thing which he did say, and I would like to leave this thought with you, is that there is a defense expo which happens every year. And perhaps if you can encourage Indian Australian industry to come and participate. And particularly what also came out very clearly in my Sydney meeting was that the focus on MSMEs. And I just want to leave this thought on you and to thank you how should I say, very warmly for this excellent tete-a-tete of what happened. And we have now understood much better as to, and we look forward to a very brighter chapter between Australia and India relationship. And as I said, why do we need a SECA to do it? Between USA and India, there is no free trade agreement. There is no investment agreement. It's just the gravity and the willingness and the desire. And the kind of influx of Indian students that I see, I see it in my own family, is a natural catalyst for that kind of growth to take place. So this is a lesson which I left to CARE to study as to how does US-India prosper without any kind of agreement, except, and the same thing instead of, otherwise we get we get sort of stuck on an ECTA or SECA or what have you. Thank you very much, Philip. Yeah, I know. This is our 40th anniversary medallion. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, sir. It was excellent.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.